Hello wonderful students, and welcome to Lesson 6 in this series on the changing economic world topic in Geography GCSE. Take a moment to write the date, title and learning objective and we shall begin. Okay, game time. Let's recall what we've learned in the past, see how much we remember and then move forward from there. Please write 1 to 10 in your books or on your sheets and answer the questions from memory, pause the video and then check your answers. Go. Okay, let's discuss the answers. So number 1, these questions, if you remember, are all about development and the stages of development that we talked about last lesson, about how development is a ladder and you move from stage 1 to stage 5. So, number 1, the death rate falls in stage 2 because healthcare or medicine improves. Number 2, birth rate is high in stage 1 because there is no contraception, which stops pregnancy, and the death rate is also high because there's no modern healthcare. Number 3, the population is low in stage 1 because the birth rate and death rate are similar. So very few people are added to the population every year. Number 4, the birth rate is still high in stage 2 because most people live in rural areas as farmers. Rural, if you remember, means countryside. Urban means city. There's also a lack of contraception, which is birth control. Number 5, the population rises rapidly in stage 2 because the birth rate is high and the death rate is falling rapidly. Better healthcare. Number 6, the birth rate starts to decrease in stage 3 because people move to urban areas and women become more educated, get contraception and want careers. Number 7, in stage 4 population growth slows down further because women are now often highly educated or skilled and focused on careers, not families. Number 8, in stages 1 and 2, most people live in rural areas, so they need many children for primary jobs, for example, in farming and mining. I've been repetitive about this because that builds your memory. Number 9, in stage 5, the population decreases. We call that natural decrease. In stage 5, the birth rate is lower than the death rate because the women have careers and there is an aging population, so more people are dying. As a result, the population decreases. Give yourselves a mark out of 11 because number 6 is worth 2 marks. Write down the questions you got wrong and write their answers and test yourself on those questions in a week. If you got them all right, fantastic, you're making excellent progress. This lesson I introduce you to a complicated but extremely important idea. It's a graph which shows the change of population and the change of birth rate and death rate as countries go from stage 1 to stage 5 of development. To understand this graph, you need to have really strong knowledge of what people are doing in LICs, NEEs and HICs. So, second recap for you. Please write 1 to 6 in your books or on your sheet and look at the following. If you recall from a previous lesson, we looked at 3 pie charts of an LIC, an NEE and an HIC. Answer the questions in your books from memory and pause the video and we will discuss the answers together. Okay, number 1. Where do most people live in LICs like Nepal? Well, if you recall, Nepal's biggest employment sector is the primary sector, farming and mining. This mostly happens in rural areas, so number 1 would be rural areas or the countryside. Number 2, what type of job do most people do in LICs like Nepal? Again, as I repeat, they do this kind of job, which is the primary sector, farming and mining. It's generally low paid. Number 3, where do people move to in NEEs, newly emerging economies, like Brazil? Well, in Brazil, you see that these 2 sectors have got larger and this one, the primary sector, has got smaller. That's because people move to cities, urban areas. We call this rural to urban migration. Number 4, why do people move to these places in NEEs? They move to these places because there are better jobs, which are higher paid. This is the secondary sector, manufacturing, and the tertiary sector, services. They also move to these places because there are more of the other kinds of opportunities, like schools for their children and hospitals. There's better transport, there's better access to clean water, electricity, internet. Their lives are likely to be better, or at least they might believe that, if they move to cities. Number 5, what happens to GDP per capita and literacy rate as you go from LIC to HIC? Well, very simply, they increase. people earn more money per year, and a much higher percent of people can read and write. And finally, number 6, suggest one way the lives of women in Brazil are different to those in Nepal. You could have had a number of possibilities here. You could have said the women are generally more educated, the women are healthier, the women have fewer children, more women live in cities, more women have higher paid jobs. Any of those possibilities. Or more women use contraception. Okay, fantastic. If you didn't perform highly in that, those 1 to 6, I would suggest you go back to your notes on this lesson when we looked at these 3 pie charts and test yourself on it quickly before you move on to the next part of this lesson. Alright, Tim. Because this is such a complex idea, I want to recap with you my main story, which is the ladder of development from stages 1 to stage 5. And here is how I showed it to you last lesson. You will remember this. I said that in stage 1, women live and men and families and communities live in small populations in places like tribes in rainforests. The birth rate is high and the death rate is high, so the population is low. In stage 2, women still live in rural areas, families still live in rural areas, so they have lots of kids, but healthcare is slightly better, so the death rate falls. Lack of contraception, however, means the birth rate is high. Stage 3, NEE is like Brazil, families move to cities, so they have fewer children, lower primary sector. There's also better access to contraception, again, fewer children. The hospitals and healthcare and quality of life in cities is often better, so the death rate falls again. So population increases in stage 3, but not quite as fast as in stage 2. Stage 4, HIC is like the UK. Birth rate and death rate are both very low now. Women are careers focused, they are educated, they don't want large families, they want a high paid job and they want their own quality of life. As a result, the population might be stable in stage 4, for example in a country like the UK. Stage 5, country like Japan, Germany or Italy, you have an aging population. There are many old people as a percent of the population because the death rate is low because their healthcare is excellent. Also the birth rate is even lower than the death rate, and as a result over time the proportion of the population that is older increases. Because the birth rate is slightly lower than the death rate, the population actually might decrease in stage 5. We call this natural decrease. Here's how this looks. The population line from 1 to 5, the death rate line from 1 to 5, and the birth rate line from 1 to 5. And here, students, is your big idea. For this lesson, I would encourage you to go to Google Images and download a picture, and if you can print it off of this, that would be fantastic, and you can stick it in and then label around it. That would be ideal. Because, here we go. This idea is called the demographic transition model, and it means the transition change, in the type and number of people in a country as it develops, as it goes from stage 1 to stage 5 of development. And here is what it looks like. This is the demographic transition model. You have stage 1 here, all the way through to stage 5 here. Up the side here, you have the birth rate and death rate per 1,000 people per year. So here, for example, in any given year, you'd expect 1,000 people to have 40 kids and 40 of those 1,000 people to die on average. The orange line shows the population. This shaded blue area here is natural increase, the population is increasing, and this shaded blue area here is natural decrease, the population is decreasing. So, I would strongly encourage you to write these as subtitles or label around your picture, but ideally go below it, each of the stages as I talk it through. In stage 1, our tribe in the Amazon, the population is low because the birth rate and death rate are high. The birth rate is high because there's no contraception, and life is dangerous, so women have lots of kids because many of their children die, and also they need labour, workers, for things like hunting. The death rate is low because there's lack of healthcare. Stage 2, population rises rapidly because the birth rate is still very high, so there are lots of people being added to the population, but the death rate falls rapidly. better healthcare. Stage 3, an NEE, like Brazil. Population still increases, but it slows down compared to stage 2. That's because the birth rate starts to fall rapidly. It does so because people move to cities, rural to urban migration. As they do so, their access to contraception increases. The women have access to better education and want better careers, so they have fewer children. The death rate continues to fall because of better healthcare in cities. Stage 4, HIC like the UK. The population is now increasing very slowly, or even towards the end of stage 4, it's stable. The birth rate keeps falling because even more families now live in cities. More than 80% of the UK's population lives in cities, and they have small families generally. So the birth rate's falling. The death rate is really low as it can be. As a result, the population isn't growing fast. Stage 5, country like Japan, Germany or Italy, the population starts to decrease. We call this natural decrease. This happens because the birth rate falls below the death rate. The death rate is slightly higher than the birth rate because an aging population means there are more older people who sadly die more often. This is the story of the demographic transition, the change in the number of people as a country develops from stage 1 to stage 5. Okay, it's a complex idea. I'm going to test you on it repeatedly, and I'm going to make you practice this transition and explaining it so that you can get it in your head very clearly. Okay, time for practice and see how much you've understood. Write 1 to 10. Attempt the questions which are about the demographic transition model, and then pause the video and then go through the answers. Go for it. Number 1. The death rate falls in stage 2 because healthcare and medicine improve. Number 2. Birth rate is high because there is no contraception and the death rate is high. This refers to stage 1, if you remember. Number 3. In stage 1, the population is low because the birth rate and death rate are similar, so the population can't increase. Number 4. The birth rate is still high in stage 2 because most people live in rural areas as farmers and there's still a lack of contraception. Number 5. The population increases or rises in stage 2 because the birth rate is high and the death rate is falling rapidly. Number 6. The birth rate starts to decrease in stage 3 because people move to urban areas and women become more educated, get contraception and want careers. Number 7. In stage 4, population growth slows down further because women are now often highly educated or skilled and focused on careers, not families. Number 8. In stages 1 and 2, most people live in rural areas, so need many children for primary jobs. Number 9. In stage 5, the population decreases. And number 10, in stage 5, the birth rate is lower than the death rate because women have careers and there is an aging population, so more people are dying. Give yourselves a mark out of 12 for this. Check what you got right or wrong. If you got all 12, fantastic. If not, come back in a week, watch this section of the video again, test yourself, check the answers. Epic. Alright, to consolidate your learning, as I always say, you need to explain things in your own words. This is called elaboration. That will help you remember it. So, I have 2 questions for you. Incorrect. I have 1 question for you. Write it as a title, and then explain the answer in your books or on your sheet using the keywords provided. Pause the video, and then check your answers. Give yourselves probably 10 minutes to do this. Game time. Here we go. Let's see how we've done. Explain why populations change as a country develops from stage 2 to stage 5. Could have said of the demographic transition model. 6-mark question. Classic question in the exam. Using all of these keywords. To get 6 marks, you had to do something like this. You had to follow the stages through and explain what happens as you pass through, as the population of a country passes through each stage of the demographic transition model, DTM. So in stage 2, healthcare improves, lowering the death rate. But most people are still in rural areas with primary sector jobs and lack contraception. So the birth rate remains high and the population grows rapidly, 2 marks. If you explain this properly, you get 2 marks. In stage 3, rapid urbanization, the increasing percent of people living in cities, means fewer children are needed, as the jobs are mostly secondary or tertiary sector. They're not on farms or in mines. Contraception and healthcare are improved, so birth rate falls as death rate continues to fall. So population increase decelerates, it slows down, 2 marks. By stage 4, most women live in cities with good education and career focus, so they want few children. Healthcare is excellent, so birth rate and death rates are both low, and the population grows slowly or is even stable, 2 marks. And finally, in stage 5, a highly developed HIC, people are aging due to the low birth rate and excellent healthcare. Most people are in cities with high-paid jobs. The elderly population raises death rate while the birth rate remains low, so there may be population decrease, 2 marks. If you got 3 of these, you got 6 marks. Correct your answers, add in green pen what you lacked, and if you didn't get 5 marks or above, then come back in a week's time, write this question out again, and answer it from memory using the keywords. Fantastic work, team. I'm so glad you're still with me. To ensure that you have some key summarized questions from this lesson, from memory, write 3 questions on anything you've learned this lesson. So anything about the demographic transition model, or what DTM stands for, or what it's about. Write the answers and then test yourselves on the answers repeatedly over the next few weeks to remember it. Thank you, students, for joining me for lesson 6. Next lesson, we will be learning about something called a population pyramid and how the age of people changes in a country as it develops. Join me then. Well done.